For most kids growing up in the 1980s, wrestling was a real-life Saturday morning cartoon. The over-the-top aesthetics, characters, and storylines were irresistible. In the ring, superstars like Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, The Rock, and Stone Cold Steve Austin weren't just superheroes, they were legends. From the wars at the Sportatorium between the Freebirds and the Von Erichs, to Hall and Nash taking over the WCW from the inside with NWO, the mythology often overshadowed the athleticism. That's why the nostalgia is so strong. From the outfits to the toys and beyond, there's so much memorabilia and souvenirs to collect or wear. One of the more popular in recent years has been wrestling t-shirts. Vintage wrestling t-shirts have become big business. This weekend, I'm in New Orleans to explore vintage shirts at the Mecca, WrestleMania. The hardest part of collecting any genre of vintage is simply knowing where to start. Luckily for me, my good friend Adam Konta, a criminal defense attorney, has been collecting vintage wrestling shirts for the better part of 20 years. Let's take a look at Adam's collection. Welcome to New Orleans.
Welcome to my world. Welcome to wrestling.
Listen, before we get into it, how many WrestleManias have you been to?
This will be my seventh in a row.
How did this stick with you? And more importantly, how did it get you to start actually collecting these vintage tees?
I mean, I want to say it's kind of like anything collectible, you know? It brings you back to a memory. It brings you back to a story. For me, I was in law school, and I actually remember where I was. I was sitting in the back of a property law class. Could not give a shit about what was being talked about. And my law school happened to be one of the first ones that made you bring laptops to class. So I'm on eBay, and for whatever reason, I just start looking for Hulk Hogan shirts. And I actually found this one. This is the first one I ever bought. This was in 2005, I bought this shirt. 20 bucks. Wow. Now this is from 1989. It came and it immediately brought me back.
Amazing.
I loved the graphic, I loved everything about it. And I hadn't seen, up until that point really, I hadn't seen anyone wearing an 80s wrestling shirt since I was a kid in the 80s going to the events. I didn't know that this even existed as like a marketplace or was a collectible thing.
What else you got down here?
This one's very special to me. This is from 1992. This is considered the greatest Royal Rumble of all time.
All right.
It has the greatest collection of superstars of all time. And it was the first time that the title was on the line and Ric Flair won it. I was at this because it happened in Albany.
So this is much more special than a traditional shirt for you because you were actually at this event.
That's right. This one is from 1990. This is the time period where the Macho Man, Randy Savage, was the Macho King. He was great. I mean, he's one of the best heels of all time.
Long live.
When I'm looking to buy a shirt, I'm looking at a lot of different things, right? You look at cut, color, condition. This has all of it. This is great condition, great color. Then you look at how common is it and how easy is it to copy. So this shirt, there are ones that have become much more iconic to reproduce. Let's say, for instance, you see someone wearing this shirt, right?
Wow, I don't think I've even seen this one in your collection. This, of course, being Roddy Piper's.
This is his main shirt.
This is his thing. Regardless of being a wrestling fan or not, there are a few telltale signs that let us know that this is an authentic piece from the era. Of course, the Hot Rod logo, the way that the ink is pressed. You can also look at the copyright date here, which of course says Titan Sports and WWF, which was, I believe, the house that they were using to release all their merchandise at that point. The other real telltale sign, outside of the fact that it has an original WWF hang tag that was added to it, is that underneath of it we find an original Screen Stars tag. And Screen Stars were the blanks of the 80s and early 90s. These are all telltale signs that this is an original shirt. When did you realize that you were not the only person on eBay looking for these shirts?
All of a sudden I was getting outbid and prices were just escalating. And this really happened over the last maybe 3 years in large part. And I gotta say, do you know who Peter Rosenberg is?
Sure.
I love him and I hate him. His gimmick is that he wears vintage wrestling shirts. And people know he loves them, he talks about loving them, and I think that he's made my job much harder.
For every face or wrestling good guy, there's a heel. The Nemesis. No show about wrestling tees would be complete without Peter Rosenberg. The Hot 97 host and WWE presenter has popularized vintage t-shirt collecting. I sent Adam over to check out his collection and see how it stacks up against his own.
It's an interest of mine that is only understood by, even within the wrestling world, only a handful of people. I got a lot of like personal strength from wrestlers for whatever reason. It was sort of like in a time when I was trying to find myself professionally, when I was on my own, like in my own head, every time I was walking, like trying to get myself hyped up, like I'm picturing Triple H just walk to the ring and spitting the water out. Like it was just a big part of who I was. And when I got to Hot 97 a few years later, it had become who I was. So I started trying to like wear stuff, but wearing like new merch just didn't feel like it. I started just like being like, stumbling into the vintage stuff and being like, this is cool. This was the shirt I wanted more than any shirt ever, was this. This was my full-blown Holy Grail shirt. This logo is like my love for 80s wrestling. It's this is it. This is what my like makes my heart like jump up and down for wrestling, is this logo. I used to search for this shirt like literally every day for years. This is one of the best shirts of all time. Yeah. I would argue that this is, if I had to whittle my collection down to 5 shirts, I think this is it. You get your collection down to the base, it's this one with those two. It doesn't get much better than that. Oh, by the way, but of course. Come on, man, you thought you were gonna come and disrespect me in my own home? But look, yours is in better shape. Mine's like yellowed. You probably like this better. You want to trade? Nice and yellowed, just like you like it. For the most part, most of it comes from my like crazed eBay digging the way you do it. That's where most of it comes from. I've never had a real good find in a store, ever. My all-time most expensive item is like, it's probably like 150 bucks. Like I've never really done anything that insane. There are trades I would make with the right person if I found someone who had like some of the ones I really feel I still need versus like a lot of ones that I like, but that like I don't ultimately need. Because almost no one has a collection of like a mass amount of 80s stuff. Never. There are not a lot of people who do it like this.
Like the Super Bowl, WrestleMania is a multi-day affair. There's events happening throughout the weekend. For the promotion's diehards, WWE Access offers fans a chance to get closer to the action. They come here for meet and greets, to get autographs, and some even come dressed as a favorite wrestler.
On that note, I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine, AJ. AJ knows Nola better than any of us and is a wrestling fanatic. She's offered to show us the ins and outs of Access and help us hunt down some vintage shirts.
What wrestling superhero are you cosplaying today?
I'm cosplaying as Kane today, one of my favorite, probably my most favorite wrestler.
What is it about wrestling that you love?
Wrestling in general is like no other form of escapism. I mean, for work and in life, I study fandoms and escapism, and this just has an element from everything, from video games, from soap operas, from sporting events. It just takes every little piece of it and mashes it into one very weird but beautiful art and dance and storytelling.
What is your favorite era of wrestling?
For me, it was the Attitude Era. I mean, I was in middle school, that's when I was watching it, so for me, it's all nostalgia and ephemera. It just has that element of like, everyone was a rock star in that era, so the t-shirts all have that really rugged, sometimes bootleg, but underground feel.
What are your favorite shirts?
My favorite one is a Kane shirt. It's the first one they made of Kane. It still has the older WWF logo on it, not the Attitude Era logo. And I mean, it's ripped up and beat up to hell, but it feels really great. And I just like that it was the first one. My other favorite shirt is a Bret Hart shirt that is iconic. It's the only shirt they ever made in neon pink. Never been worn, it's in great condition. I will probably never wear it. I just really like that I have it. It's special to me.
So we know that WrestleMania is a weekend-long event, and there's a lot of activity for fans. We're now at WWE Access. What exactly is this?
Access is put on by the WWE, and it's pretty much, it's more like an amusement park carnival setup. WWE is really good at making you feel something, and that's what this is.
Yeah, I got this shirt off of eBay just specifically for this event. Grew up a big Hulk Hogan fan. I'm in my 30s now, so like a lot of Hulk Hogan fans are in their 30s. And I was really lucky to get it for a pretty good price. I never had these kinds of shirts as a kid. Like, my dad would let me go to the shows, but he'd never get me really like any of the merchandise or memorabilia until I got older and got them myself. So I'd really like to go back and look at all the stuff that I couldn't afford as a kid and try to get it now.
Dylan, great shirt.
Oh, thank you.
How long have you had it? Tell me about it.
I've had it for about 10 years. I got it in Portland, Oregon.
Tell me what you paid for it.
I think like 15 bucks.
15 bucks.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's worth way more.
So this shirt's from 1992. You see it's black. Now, a lot of the shirts we've been looking at are from the Attitude Era, and almost all of them are black. There aren't that many shirts like this from the 90s, the early 90s, 80s that were black. It was really just this one, some Jake the Snake shirts, and a few others. But you can tell by the feel of this shirt, you can tell how soft it is, that this is a pre-Attitude Era shirt.
What is the value of this shirt right now, Adam?
This is a pretty rare shirt. The colors are great, the picture's great, and quite honestly, Ric Flair just wasn't in the WWE that long. He could sell this shirt easily for $150 right now if he wanted to.
And if you thought Access was intense, there's even more. WrestleCon, another sprawling fan convention that attracts thousands of diehard fans all over WrestleMania weekend. Rob runs a sneaker boutique in Albuquerque called Phoenix Splash, but he's at WrestleCon selling a great collection of vintage shirts.
We spent this morning looking at the golden era of t-shirts, and I'd love to know, like, what is your connection to the Attitude Era? And also, like, tell people, what is it about the Attitude Era that makes it different from anything before it?
So my connection is, that's pretty much when I grew up, was the Attitude Era.
This is the 90s?
The 90s. You know, I was born in '87. I'm 31 now. And there was the dawn of, Stone Cold, Austin 316 against Jake the Snake, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Iron Man match. DX coming up, NWO. It was just so raw. People my age is at an age where nostalgia is huge. We have the money to buy what we couldn't get back then. And that's something that's really big for me.
Are these all around the same price?
It depends, man. Like, I've certain ones, it's mostly 50, 60.
And how are you coming up with that price?
I do some research, eBay.
So eBay's still super important, right?
Oh yeah. New Age Outlaws, I don't see this often. Billy Gunn's actually over there. I mean, look at that. Paul White, the Giant, before the Big Show.
And he's still wrestling.
He's still wrestling. He has the NWO tag. The more washed, the better. Got the holes. And you come to like later.
That's a big shirt. Was this a real big WrestleMania?
The WrestleMania itself was not one of the biggest WrestleManias, but this match is one of the greatest matches of all time.
You could argue the biggest match ever. You're talking two eras that you never thought was gonna collide.
So we're looking at the Golden Era versus the Attitude Era.
That's right.
This is where it comes together.
That's it. This was the meeting of two eras.
So, been to WrestleCon, we've been to Access, we've been across the streets of New Orleans. What's your takeaway on vintage wrestling shirts here in New Orleans?
Well, I think the takeaway is that vintage means different things to different people, just like wrestling. Me, I love collecting the golden age of wrestling shirts, and we came here to look for vintage finds. We didn't see a ton of vintage shirts from the 80s because they're a lot rarer, they're a lot more expensive to get into, and it takes a lot more effort, I think, to find that era of shirt because it's just not that much. But now there's a whole new group of people who find the Attitude Era to be their vintage, like Kane. Those shirts are more accessible, they're a little bit cheaper, so you can find them on eBay easier, or even around in thrift stores. It's time for a whole new generation to find vintage.
Amazing, man. All right, let's head to the show.